Stories of Vision Loss. This episode features Jeanne.
Trauma gets embedded in the brain and in the memory, and truth is what unmasks shame. Well, my name is Jean Malmgren. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Sunset, South Carolina, which is a tiny little, almost invisible dot on the map here in the Blue Ridge Mountains, kind of in the middle of a wild wilderness area. Have retired here in the last couple of years with my husband. I am a psychotherapist. I'm still practicing part-time. I've been doing that for about 10 or 15 years. That's actually my second career. My first career was in journalism. So I love to write. And in the past year, I took on the personal challenge of writing the story of my vision loss, which goes all the way back to age 2. And it's a story that I think I wasn't really ready to write until now, because I, as a psychotherapist, wanted to include the whole concept of recovering from the trauma and how it has arced through my life and how I have dealt with it at various stages of development in different ages. So it feels like a fulfillment, I would say, to have written the book at this point, and it feels good to be sharing it with the world.
Yeah. Okay, well, take me back through your book. Tell me how vision loss fits into your story from age 2.
Well, my story, I would say, is one of those pretty emblematic childhood injury stories where there's a moment of inattention on a parent's part, just a tragic, 1-second mistake. This happened with my mother and I didn't know this for years and years and years. And this is part of what happens in the book, is my search for the truth of what really truly happened on this one day in the kitchen when I was 2 years old in my high chair. But my mother was cooking and left a knife on the counter. She had been peeling potatoes, and it was within reach of the high chair. And of course, obviously, I have no memory of this, but somehow I got a hold of the knife and plunged it into my eye.
Mm.
And this was the late 1950s, early 60s. And, my parents went to great lengths to get medical care for me, but things didn't move very fast. I mean, like they didn't immediately jump in the car and take me to the ER, which of course is what would happen today. You'd be at urgent care or something. It was just handled differently back then, as many things were. So I got medical attention, but it was really probably too little too late, and I lost the vision in the eye. There was a lot of talk about removing the eye because they were concerned about sympathetic ophthalmia, where the trauma of an injured eye can cause infection in the normal eye and take the sight there as well. So to prevent that, they really debated removing the eye, but it calmed down, the infection calmed down. And so they left the eye. So I have a shrunken, disfigured eye that is blind. And that was my state of living for the first 8 years. I basically spent a big chunk of my childhood walking around with this horrific looking eye, which I adapted very easily to monocular vision. But psychologically, emotionally, it was very hard. And I finally got a prosthetic eye to cover the disfigured eye. I think I was 9. So the book that I've written begins with the injury and then starts to move through my childhood of dealing with that, the emotional aspect of that, then moving into adolescence, even after I received a prosthetic eye. And they never, prosthetic eyes are amazing technology, and they really make life very close to normal for people who've lost one eye. But you just can't quite mimic the human eye perfectly. And so even though I had them all the way through and have had them the rest of my life, it's remained an issue in terms of my self-image and my self-perception. So it was really my internal struggle and trauma that, I knew I looked weird and ugly, during crucial years of forming self-image. That's a problem. But when I got the prosthetic eye, it was much better. I didn't have to hang my head and not look at people. I could finally look people straight on. But I know now as a therapist that during those crucial years before that, there was a lot of cemented in self-image that was developing there.
Hmm. Yeah, we all have those cemented childhood things, don't we?
We do. We do. You're right. For various reasons.
Yeah.
Everyone has something in their history that, yeah. And it's hard to overcome those as an adult, even when, the other part of your brain that's not traumatized
Mhm.
knows that you're still a valuable human being. And
Mhm.
it is hard to overcome that. It takes a long, long time,
Yeah.
I think.
Well, so as a psychotherapist, what are some of the strategies, even though it's difficult to overcome, what are some of the things you can do to start chipping away at that healing?
That's a great question. And I'm just thinking of what I do with my own clients who
Mhm.
have, for example, abuse histories where they grew up feeling unworthy and unloved because of an abusive parent or a neglectful parent or a, distracted parent or any of those things.
Mhm.
There's a therapy that I've started to work with. It's called Internal Family Systems, IFS. And it's a beautiful therapy. I really love it. It's very gentle. It's not about reliving trauma and it's not about sort of exposure therapy, those kind of things. It's very soft and it goes in very gently into those internal messages that people are carrying and doesn't confront them so much as just engages with them.
Mhm. Do you just tease it out with group therapies?
Well, it's not a group, it's an individual, even though it says family systems,
Okay.
that is sort of
Misnomer.
it's sort of a misguiding name. But the idea of it is that you have this whole family of parts inside of you
Mm.
that we all do. We have a part that feels bad about ourselves, or we have a part that feels confident doing certain things, or we have a part that is very good at connecting with other people. And then we have these parts that are wounded from early experiences. And if we can go within, guided by a therapist, and really literally sort of talk to those parts and help them understand that the situation has changed.
Mm.
Because most of these parts don't, they're still operating back in ancient history. For instance, in my case, where, I had this horrific looking disfigured eye that the whole world could see. Well, that's not the case anymore. But there's a part of me that still cringes about that. When someone looks at me straight on, that part is inside of me going, ooh, does that person think I look weird? Has my prosthetic eye sort of rotated upwards? Sometimes they do. And I don't even realize it.
Mm.
So there's a part inside each of us, if we have a wounding that is stuck, sort of stuck back in the past and has to be gently, again, the gentleness is an important part of it, brought into the present where the wounding is not happening anymore.
Yeah.
And then that part can soften and relax and give up that burden that it's carrying. And we call the process unburdening. I hope that all makes sense. It's a brief one-on-one description of the therapy.
Yeah, it does.
That's what I've been doing lately with helping people encounter old wounds that are still informing how they feel about themselves and how they act in the world.
Allowing people to meet those parts of themselves and change them if they want to.
Yeah. And we really change them by acknowledging that they're carrying a burden and letting them know that they don't have to carry that burden anymore. But this is all about how trauma gets embedded in the brain and in the memory stores of the brain. It can be pretty it can be pretty deeply embedded in there.
Yeah. It sounds heavy. It sounds weighted. And you're taking some of that baggage out.
Right. Good description. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a chapter in the book called Face to Face. And I didn't plan this in terms of my career, but I ended up with two careers, journalism and psychotherapy, where I am face to face with people. I'm either interviewing people as a journalist, I'm sitting across from them in the therapy room. And as a person with a disfigured eye, that's hard. That's very hard. And as I say, I didn't plan that, but it sort of is the way that the universe dropped it into my lap, I think, so that I could work with that challenge. And it's worked out well. I'm grateful that I had that challenge.
So you said that when you were little, you didn't know exactly what happened, and then you had to learn through time, through asking questions, what exactly happened when you were 2 years old. So what did you know to start, and then how did you learn the story for yourself?
Well, one thing I'm clear about is that I could not have written this book when my mother was still alive, because she bore a huge load of guilt, as you can imagine, and
Mm.
self-blame for turning her back on her toddler who was in the high chair for, one crucial second. So as it happened, a few times over the years, I had tried to get the truth out of my mother. I had tried to have a heart to heart with her about it, but it was just too painful. It was too difficult. It would take her to a really bad place. So I let it lie. And after she died, I had to clean out her house, and I found a box with all the medical records and all the papers and everything that had to pertain to my accident that she had saved. And I really think now that she saved it for me to find. She knew that I would be the one going through everything in the house when she and Dad were gone, and that I would find this box and I would find the truth.
That must have been an amazing moment.
Yeah, 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 it really was, because I was thinking about writing the book anyway. And then I started just looking around. I had brought all these boxes from her house, and they were just stored in my closets. And it had been several years, and I was going through the grief process, and I didn't really want to go through those boxes, but I finally did. And then I just came across, it was like she just left it there for me. It was like her spirit said, well, I know you're going to write a book, so
Mm.
here's the research material that you need. Thank you very much.
Yeah. You were able to grieve the loss of your mother and grieve the process of your vision loss all in one go, which sounds amazing. That gift.
Right. Good point. I hadn't even thought of that. That, yeah, it sort of all came at once. And grieving for her as well, the grief that she clearly felt and had to carry through the rest of her life.
That guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of healing on my end about that, knowing how hard that was for her.
Hmm.
And, our family's whole way of dealing with this was basically not to talk about it. And I think my parents did that really to protect me and just act like everything was fine. And they gave me a great education and, travel and a lot of wonderful advantages in my life. But I never had that crucial piece of truth. And this is maybe important or of interest, I would say, to listeners of this podcast, that I realize now that I did not have my identity as a person with a disability, because I was trying to fake like I was normal. And, it would have been so much easier, I think, in retrospect, for me to just be able to embrace the fact that I was living with a disability. But since it was sort of covered up and invisible, I just sort of had this sense of, well, I'm not normal, but no one really knows that. But I'm not disabled because we're not talking about that. So I was in sort of a netherworld in between the two.
Yeah. There's sort of a shroud of shame over it too, by not acknowledging it.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And truth is what unmasks shame.
Yeah.
That rips the cloak off of there.
So you have an identity now as a person with a disability.
Yeah.
How does that feel for you now?
It feels fantastic. It feels so good, because it's the other piece of my identity that no one knew. The main part that I love is it's just like me throwing up my arms in the air saying, this is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
This is who I am. I'm a person who has this one weird looking eye, and no one knew it because it's covered up, and I can function with one seeing eye, but it wasn't the real me. The other thing I would like to mention is that there's a part of the book where I describe another different kind of trauma that I went through when I was young, and it caused something that I didn't know for years what it was. But my seeing eye, which is normal, started becoming incredibly sensitive to light, photophobia, to the point where, I was seeking all kinds of medical attention. I honestly thought I was going blind with the seeing eye. I literally could not go outside in daylight. I had a car accident because I just crashed into something I couldn't even see while I was driving. And it took me really until I studied psychotherapy to find out that there is something called conversion disorder. This is actually a psychiatric disorder where an emotional or a psychological trauma is converted, there's the conversion, into a physical symptom. And I mean, it could be anything. Some people with conversion disorder become paralyzed or their hearing goes. It could be one of their other senses. But with me, because my vision is my, weak point, my vulnerable place, it went for my good eye. And that was a very interesting experience of healing from that as well.
That is interesting. So I know that there's an emotional response, like when you really like or love someone, your pupil will dilate.
Yes.
And I wonder, and that's an emotional response, right?
Right.
And
right.
so is that kind of a similar emotional response in your eye, like dilating your pupil, and that's what causes the photophobia?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about the actual mechanics of it. I know that I went to all kinds of ophthalmologists and they did every test they had on me and found nothing that was in the way that the eye was functioning. There was nothing wrong. So I don't know. I don't know if there was a dilation happening. That's an interesting point, that the pupil was not dilating and letting in too much light. I hadn't even thought about that. That's really interesting.
Tell me what the name of your book is.
The name of the book is Good Eye, Bad Eye. And then the subtitle is A Memoir of Trauma and Truth.
Beautiful title.
Thank you. Thank you. Of course, good eye, bad eye refers to, from a very young age. I just picked that up from my parents, Your my bad eye is the one that doesn't see, and my good eye is the one I still have. So
yeah.
I remember my mother saying to me, if my seeing eye would itch or something and I would reach up and just rub it, she'd say, "Don't rub your good eye. Don't take care of your good eye."
Bubble wrap it.
Yeah, and that's of course always been a thing in my life of wearing safety glasses when mowing the yard and things like that.
Yeah.
Taking care of the good eye so that it doesn't fail me. That's life as a monocular.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to ask about life as a monocular. What were some of the struggles, some of the advantages, some tips, tricks, anything you want to share?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the advantages is I am like the world's best backer in a car when I'm driving a car. I can back, and I think it's because I'm not distracted by peripheral vision on the one side. I'm not sure, to be honest, exactly what it is, but I can back a car better than I can drive it forward. But of course, I don't have peripheral vision on the right side, and I fell in love with yoga, and I trained to become a yoga teacher at one point in my life. I was certified as a yoga teacher. But when I try to balance on my right side, which is my blind side, I wobble because I don't have like spatial awareness of the right side of my body.
That oculovestibular connection.
Thank you. That's exactly the right term. Yes.
Yeah.
So that affects my balance sometimes. But I am fortunate, and I'm grateful for this, that it happened so early in life that a lot of people who lose an eye in adulthood or later in life, they struggle quite a bit, I think, with depth perception and bumping into things and pouring something in the wrong way. If you're pouring something into a glass or something, there's a huge adjustment there that I don't even remember. I went through that adjustment at age 2, and my older brother tells me he can remember right after my injury that my head would turn to the right, which means that my left eye was trying to come to the center, so that I would sort of have the same field of vision. And he said after a while I stopped doing that. At some point, evidently, my brain figured out how to move through the world without being able to see the right side. I would say other than that, life as a monocular is very, very, it's, I'm blessed in a way because it's very normal. I have no idea what it's like to see through two eyes. So, there's a part in the book where I talk about all the things that I've been able to do with one eye. I'm not a very good athlete, but I don't think that has anything to do with eyesight. I'm just sort of lousy athletically. But I mean, I've played tennis and racquetball and sailed a sailboat when I was in college. And I don't think it's really held me back. I mean, I'm not great. If somebody just throws me a ball, it's 50-50 whether I'm going to catch it. So I do sort of shy away from those sports.
And being able to drive is a major advantage.
Yes. Well, it is. It is. And again, I think as a monocular, you just adapt to that. I think if you watched me drive, you would see me turn my head more than most people do.
Mhm.
I'm really careful when I'm switching lanes.
Have you ever used prisms?
Prisms. No, not sure what you mean.
Yeah, like prisms in your glasses to expand your field.
Oh, no, I have not done that. I have not. The DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, is not my favorite place in the world. Every time I have to go in and do that vision test, I'm just nervous as a cat because I don't know if they're going to turn me away. I've had all kinds of different responses to it, and I probably have lots of company, people with any degree of vision loss going in there and trying to pass that damn vision test. It's not fun, especially when, I have a very good driving record. I'm not a bad driver because I'm a monocular.
Mm.
I'm probably a more careful driver. I'm sure I am, I have to be.
Yeah. You mentioned that you moved to the wilderness in your retirement. So tell me more about where you're living out in the wilderness. Do you take advantage of being out there in the wild?
Yes, definitely. One of the other branches of therapy that I have gotten into as a specialty is nature therapy. I took a training several years ago to become an ecotherapist, meaning an earth-based therapist. And so not all of my sessions, but some of my client sessions are conducted outdoors. So I wanted to live somewhere that I could do that on my own property. So it's not huge, but we have about 15 acres where we've moved, and we've spent the last couple of years putting a trail through the woods along the creek, and I take clients walking through there. It's sort of my own wonderful place to be in nature myself, but also to share it with other people for healing purposes.
Wow, that sounds heavenly. That sounds amazing.
Well, and that's the thing, people with vision impairment can still be outdoors and be in a meditative state. That's also part of my book, by the way, is my own spiritual path has taken me into Buddhism. And I don't think that's an accident at all. I think that's probably has a real meant to be quality, because Buddhism is one of those spiritual paths that's so much about going within, inner vision.
Mm-hmm.
What is happening inside your mind, and you don't need external vision to do that kind of exploration.
Yeah.
It's been beautiful for me. I can go to Buddhist trainings and meditation retreats, and it doesn't matter. I mean, we're all sitting there with our eyes closed.
Yeah. Even in the beginning, when you're talking about face to face,
Right.
if your baseline is, oh, I wonder what this person's thinking of me. Oh, do they think I'm ugly? Oh, what are they thinking?
Right.
Then you're obscuring that internal vision
Right.
of having your baseline just be a confident human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
Well, thank you. I mean, your story is amazing. I love what you're doing and all of the psychotherapy and all of the realizations that you've had for yourself that you're now paying forward and passing on to other people. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Yeah, that is my hope for the book, that it might resonate with others who are on their own healing journey of whatever kind. And it doesn't have to be just vision. It could be any trauma that someone has been carrying a long time and is learning to incorporate and process in a different way. That's one of the blessings of aging. I'm really happy to be aging into the latter part of my life, because it just gets better all the time.
Yeah. That is an interesting thing too, that just the topic of aging and grieving alongside aging. You're sort of grieving your youth, but also you're coming to a lot of healing through time.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
yeah, that's
Yes. Yeah.
that could be a whole other conversation, I'm sure.
Yes, it could. It could.
Yeah. Well, do you want to share anything else before we wrap it up?
Well, maybe just tell people I'm releasing the book Good Eye, Bad Eye in sort of a two-part way. The first part is that I'm serializing it one chapter at a time online, and that is in my newsletter and Substack. So that is just goodeyebadeye.substack.com. Especially for people with vision loss, that's a wonderful way to experience the book because each chapter has an audio of me reading the chapter.
Okay, great. We'll share all those links in our show notes so that people can
Great.
find you. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your story. And hopefully people can read your book and find you and connect, even if remotely.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Charlotte, for giving me the opportunity to share some of this. And you asked some beautiful questions that I think brought out more layers of it. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for what you do for people with vision challenges. It's a beautiful, beautiful work. If you need anything else, let me know.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, have a good evening.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you to Jeanne for sharing your story. We'll share information in our show notes for Jeanne's Substack, goodeyebadeye.substack.com. Thank you to MJ Jefferson for our production and creative partnership. And a quick reminder, don't forget to check out our new recording feature at storiesofvisionloss.com or simply click the link in the episode description to get started. We've also got some exciting news. Our podcast is now available on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date with all of our latest episodes. Hitting that like button not only shows you our content, but it also helps the YouTube algorithm recommend similar content. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening.